You all wanted this one, didn't you? Well, you got it. Yesterday, I gave you my picks for the top 15 best movies of 2021. The movies that reminded me of why I love cinema so much. Today, I give you my picks for the top 10 worst movies of 2021. The movies that reminded me of why I hate cinema sometimes. Let's go ahead and begin with 5 honorable mentions. First one, Black Widow. This one is actually quite disappointing to me. I really wanted to love Black Widow. The trailers looked amazing, but it just fell extremely short. Up next, we have The Marksman, a very, very dull and borderline boring Liam Neeson action thriller. Don't Breathe 2, a very, very generic and borderline dumb sequel to one of the best horror movies of the 2010s. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I love the books, but this just was not doing it for me. And finally, Escape Room Tournament of Champions. First one wasn't good, this one was just worse. So, we've got past the honorable mentions. Let's go ahead and get into the top 10, starting off with number 10. And this is a movie that I did not entirely hate, but it still has to make it onto the list, and that is Tom and Jerry. Like I said in my review for the movie back when it first came out, have never been a super huge fan of Tom and Jerry. I think it's fine, but it just wasn't really my thing as a child, and it's still not really my thing here. To people who liked this movie, more power to you. You probably grew up loving Tom and Jerry, unlike I did, which I really just tolerated it because my sisters and my father loved it so much. But yeah, I just did not really enjoy this movie whatsoever, aside from Michael Pena, who is always hilarious. But other than that, no thanks. No more Tom and Jerry for me. Number 9 is something that was a bit of a disappointment for me because I did grow up liking the show and at least the first movie, and that is the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run. I didn't expect this movie to be good by any means. I just wanted it to be somewhat enjoyable, like the 2015 movie, Sponge Out of Water. Wasn't great, but it was still enjoyable in some parts. This one was just unbearable from beginning to end. Obviously, I still love Patrick in this movie. It's Patrick. I love Patrick. I loved him in the show. I loved him in this movie. But the animation is absolutely horrifying in this movie. I don't know why they went with the 3D. And the story is kind of dumb, and it gives an origin story that we didn't need for a lot of the character relationships in this movie, and kind of retcons a lot of stuff that was established early in the show, but either way, whatever. It's number 9. Number 8 is another movie I was actually interested in seeing, but upon seeing it, I realized maybe this movie should have stayed canceled, and that is Chaos Walking. I said in my review for this movie back when it first came out, Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley do a great job. They know what they're doing, but the rest of the cast, not good. Despite Mads Mikkelsen being one of my favorite actors of all time, he was horribly underutilized in this movie. I thought the story was generic, boring, kind of predictable, and it set up for a sequel that we're just never going to get, and I had to put it on this list. Number 7 is something that I wasn't very surprised by, but I watched anyway, and that is Cry Macho, Clint Eastwood's latest movie, which I thought Clint Eastwood was done acting after The Mule in, 2018. I thought that was going to be his last acting role. Apparently, he had this one planned as well. This is an even more boring version of The Marksman, pretty much, with literally no action. Clint Eastwood does give a good performance. It's Clint Eastwood. He's a good actor, but he's in his 90s. He shouldn't be doing roles like this anymore. But either way, I just didn't really care for this one. Number 6, we're getting into the really, really bad ones here with The Unholy. This movie was absolutely terrible. I reviewed this back when it first came out, once again, and my point still stands. I absolutely hated this movie, aside from Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who just is an actor who always understands the assignment. But other than that, absolutely horrible movie, completely forgettable. I don't even remember anything that went on in the plot at this point, other than the fact that Cary Elwes couldn't decide what accent he wanted to use. But either way, didn't really care for this movie at all. Number 5, continuing the trend of really awful horror movies from last year, we have Separation, which for some reason was released in theaters, despite the fact that it is clearly a straight-to-DVD quality film. I did not like this movie whatsoever. None of the acting was good in this movie. The creature designs were awful. The CGI was absolutely horrid. Like I said, straight-to-DVD quality. Brian Cox is in this movie, and the only reason this movie gets a 1 out of 10 is because I hadn't seen Brian Cox in anything in a while, and it was just nice to see him again. But his acting was horrid. Rupert Friend's acting was horrid. I just hated this movie with a passion. Number 4, a very, very disappointing animated sequel for me. Unlike Sing 2, which was in my top 15 best, but in my top 10 worst, number 4 is going to be The Addams Family 2. I still really like the 2019 Addams Family film. I still find it very underrated and very enjoyable. I watch it along with the other 2 live-action films every October with my wife and now my child as well. But this movie was absolutely horrid. It took everything that was charming and good about the 2019 animated movie and just threw it all out for the sake of cringy humor, horrible, horrible dialogue, terrible song and dance sequences, worse animation. They replaced a couple of the voice actors, mainly for Pugsley, because I guess Finn Wolfhard was too old at the time or too busy. I don't remember what their excuse was. And multiple references to multiple R-rated properties that children either don't know about or should not know about yet. And I get it, a lot of kids' movies put in some low-key adult humor for the parents to enjoy, but it wasn't even funny in this movie. I am just going to move on. Number 3 was my worst movie of the entire year since July. You could tell how bad the first 2 are by the fact that this is now number 3. And that is Space Jam: A New Legacy. I did not want to go in hating this movie. I wanted to give it a chance because as horribly dated as it is, I do like the first Space Jam. But this movie is just absolutely terrible. LeBron James, not a good actor. There's actually a joke towards it in this movie. I really don't appreciate the people defending this movie saying, whoa, it's made for kids. It doesn't have to be good. What does that say about our children? What are we saying what our thoughts are on our children by saying this movie doesn't have to be good because kids like it? Shouldn't a movie still be good for it to be a kids movie? Have we just lowered our standards on how a kids movie should be? It just doesn't fly for me. I did not like it. It was literally just a 2-hour commercial for HBO Max, which I already had HBO Max, so I don't know why they were trying to sell it to me for 2 hours straight with horrible animation. Don Cheadle trying his best to save this movie, but not very good at it. I love Don Cheadle, but this movie does his careers no favor. Number 2, our runner-up. I don't know why I watched this. I knew it was bad going in. I guess it was just my morbid curiosity and it got the best of me. Home Sweet Home Alone. Oh, this movie. I love the first two Home Alone movies, even though the second one is basically just a carbon copy of the first one that does nothing new except change locations. I don't like 3. I never bothered with 4 and 5. I don't know why I watched this one. I guess I was kind of optimistic since it's Disney and I feel like they could do a good Home Alone movie, but this just was not it. The kid is completely unlikable, and I don't want to say that because he was really, really good in Jojo Rabbit, but he was absolutely terrible in this movie. I don't blame him. I blame the writing and his agent for picking this movie for him. I don't know why they made the burglars borderline good guys, kind of sympathetic. I don't know why they did that, and this movie is just unfunny. And the part where the burglars are getting beat up should be funny, but it's painful to watch because we know that they're not ill-intentioned people. They're just in a bad situation. And this kid's literally trying to murder them. And I just, it doesn't sit well with me. However, number 1, worst movie of 2021. I almost did not make it through this movie. What could be worse than Home Sweet Home Alone? Dear Evan Hansen. Dear Evan Hansen. I love musicals. Don't get me wrong. This movie is not doing the musical genre any favors whatsoever. I enjoy the Broadway version of Dear Evan Hansen. I think it's actually a really good story. But this movie is absolutely terrible. First of all, Ben Platt is in his 30s. And he's playing a middle schooler. It was more believable when Tobey Maguire played a senior in high school in the first Spider-Man movie. Because Tobey Maguire's acting in the first Spider-Man movie was actually good. Ben Platt is awful in this movie. And he has such a punchable face. Evan Hansen is a borderline sociopath who lies to get what he wants. He lies about being friends with this kid who unalives himself to get fame and popularity. It does not work because they removed a lot of the story beats from the Broadway version that made it to where he was eventually brought to justice for lying. And it's just absolutely terrible. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's move on. So that was my picks for the top 10 worst movies of 2021. And I don't have to think of these movies ever again. I'm free. I don't have to do it anymore. Thank God. Either way, let me know what your worst movie of 2021 was down in the comments. I would love to hear what you thought it was. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and I will see you next time I have something to say.